Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Buenas noches, señores y señores. Es un gusto estar con ustedes. I've been practicing that all day, and I'm afraid that's as far as my Spanish goes. My name is James Wood. I'm the Communications Officer at the Internet Society. As some of you may remember, I had the privilege to host the previous Internet Hall of Fame ceremony 2 years ago in Los Angeles, which coincided with the Internet Society's 25th anniversary. So it's an enormous pleasure to be here again and to have the honor for a second time to be part of this important gathering, this time in Costa Rica. Costa Rica is known the world over for its stunning natural landscapes, its impressive biodiversity, and as one of the world's happiest countries, it's also home to the concept of pura vida, or simple or pure life. My colleague Nancy, who is from here, San Jose, explained to me that pura vida is exclusive to Costa Rica, and that you can use it as a phrase for pretty much anything. Hello, how are you? Thank you, goodbye. Fluent Costa Rican in just 2 words. But it's clearly more than something people say. It's a way of life and an inherent part of the culture, a spirit that keeps people positive and looking forward. And I think there's something in that idea for us here tonight. Because if there is a spiritual home for the Internet, it's the Internet Hall of Fame. A place of optimism rooted in a deep-seated belief in the positive difference that the Internet can make to people everywhere. Founded in 2012, the Internet Hall of Fame exists as a program to honor the pioneers, entrepreneurs, and trailblazers who have made significant contributions to the advancement and expansion of the global Internet around the world. This is the network of people behind the network of networks. The people who have been instrumental in defining the Internet we know and use today. But more than that, through their example, they've shown us that the way to build the Internet is by respecting its core design. It's the interdependency or interconnection between one network and another and across all the networks that unlocks the Internet's potential and makes it a powerful promoter of opportunity. And thanks to the power of the Internet, we can celebrate this special occasion with audiences from around the world tonight. So, in the spirit of Pura Vida, welcome to everyone here in San Jose and to all those joining online. Tonight's ceremony marks the first time the awards have been held in Latin America. We're extremely proud to bring the event to Costa Rica, a country that stands out not just for its natural wonders, but also for the strong example it has set in employing a collaborative approach to Internet governance and the systematic steps it has taken to close the digital divide. And you'll be hearing more about that shortly. But first, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the Internet Society's Costa Rica chapter president, Luis Carlos Solano, who is here with us tonight. Originally a telecommunications engineer at Cisco, Luis Carlos was involved in some of the early Internet networks here in Costa Rica. As chair of the chapter since 2016, he's helped to grow its presence, and we greatly appreciate his continued dedication and the work of all the chapter members in Costa Rica. We're also happy to have a number of chapter fellows from across the region joining us this evening, as well as the Internet Society's Vice President for Latin America and the Caribbean, Sebastian Belagamba. I can't see him, but he's out there somewhere. There he is. And Sarah Armstrong, who recently joined the Internet Society as the Executive Director of the Internet Society Foundation. Sarah is also out there somewhere. Now, to get things underway, I'd just like to introduce the Internet Society's President and CEO to say a few words, Andrew Sullivan.
Thank you, James. I'm not going to torture you with my even worse Spanish. Before I joined the Internet Society staff, when I first heard about the Hall of Fame, I got to admit, a little skeptical. And the reason I was skeptical is because Hall of Fame sounds like, oh, there are these, great gods of the Internet who have brought us these things, these individual achievements who made the world and the rest of us have to stand back in awe. And the truth is that the internet isn't like that. And then I thought about the people who are being added to the Hall of Fame, and I listened to them, and I know some of them, many of them, and I thought, none of those people are like that. All of those people instead take seriously the spirit of the internet, which is a profoundly human and collaborative effort. Right there in the name, right? The internet, the network of networks, coming together, delivering us all benefits that none of us could have on our own. Nobody could build the internet independently. It's really a collective enterprise. And one of the things that is so inspiring about this evening and this ceremony is that all of the people that we get to honor tonight are people who have embodied that very effort. Each one of them having thought of, oh, here's a thing that I can do, and here are some friends that I can bring along, and here are some people that I know. Oh, and that person over there is doing something similar, and how can we collaborate on this? And if you read the biographies, the statements of the achievements of these people that we're honoring tonight, that comes through over and over again. So one of the things I think is wonderful about this Internet Hall of Fame is that it's an Internet Hall of Fame. It's not a Hall of Fame of, great gods of the sky. It's a Hall of Fame of people who make the Internet. At the Internet Society, we like to say that the Internet is for everyone, and all of these people embody that dedication to an Internet that we all share, a common enterprise that we do together. And that's the reason that I am so pleased to welcome the Minister for Science, Technology, and Telecommunications of Costa Rica, Luis Adrian Salazar, who is here to accept our appreciation from the Internet Society of Costa Rica's efforts to make the Internet for everyone, to make sure that it is, in fact, an instrument for the betterment of everyone. One of the things that I really like about the description, sorry, I broke my glasses today, and the bifocals don't work on these, so I have to look very carefully. One of the things that I really like about the description of the ministry is that it is for the socioeconomic development of the country and for the improvement of the quality of life of citizens. This isn't about, numbers only. I mean, numbers, sure, they count. But it's also about making sure that the quality of life of people, that is improved, so that the internet remains this instrument of good for all humanity. So, with that, Minister, will you come forward and accept our thanks?
Thank you. First of all, I want my Vice Minister of Telecommunications pass here, please. I would like that you be here with me. Hold me there. First of all, thank you to be here this night. A special welcome to our foreign visitors. I hope that you really enjoy your stay here in Costa Rica. And I will speak in Spanish because I really feel that I have to speak in Spanish where I receive an award on behalf of the government. Primero que todo, muy buenas noches. Yo quisiera agradecer porque hoy me toca a mí, como ministro de Ciencia, Tecnología y Telecomunicaciones, recibir un reconocimiento que es la suma del trabajo de mucha gente a lo largo del tiempo. De mucha gente que ha contribuido a poder crecer, a poder hacer que nuestro país dé un salto cualitativo en el desarrollo de las telecomunicaciones. No puedo dejar pasar el momento sin agradecer a personas que sembraron la semilla para poder empezar a interconectar a este país. No puedo dejar pasar el momento de agradecer a don Guy de Teramón por los esfuerzos que ha hecho a lo largo de estos tiempos por traer a Costa Rica Internet. Un aplauso, don Guy. No puedo dejar de agradecer a las personas que a lo largo del tiempo han ocupado posiciones en la Superintendencia de Telecomunicaciones, de los cuales hoy contamos con algunos de ellos acá y a los cuales yo quisiera darles un fuerte aplauso. Igualmente, quisiera agradecer a los miembros del equipo del Ministerio de Ciencia, Tecnología y Telecomunicaciones, en especial a mi querido viceministro don Edwin Estrada, que con gallardía y esfuerzo día a día nos apoya en el desarrollo de las telecomunicaciones de este país. A vos, total gracias. Y pues obviamente, yo quisiera agradecerles a ustedes por considerarnos, por considerar que Costa Rica ha hecho esfuerzos en la ruta de poder, contra todos los retos que esto significa, dar el paso al frente. Y no es fácil, y no es sencillo, y sabemos que cuesta. Y sabemos que tenemos un reto que cada vez, dada la velocidad con la que crece las telecomunicaciones, dada la rapidez y el impacto que tienen las telecomunicaciones en la vida de las personas, tenemos que ser más asertivos. Yo creo que hasta el momento hemos hecho bien las cosas, pero las vamos a seguir haciendo mejor. El compromiso del gobierno de la República, el compromiso del ministerio, el compromiso del señor presidente es que podamos dejar que las telecomunicaciones en Costa Rica sean el elemento habilitador para que todos podamos tener mejor innovación, mejor calidad de vida y sobre todo una sociedad más solidaria. Una sociedad que el conocimiento sea el activo más importante para poder desarrollarnos. Yo quisiera agradecer porque son muchas las personas que por Costa Rica trabajan y que han visto que la tecnología de la información, el desarrollo científico, la innovación son elementos esenciales para poder salir adelante. No vamos a dejar a nadie atrás, vamos a seguir trabajando en esta ruta, pero lo más importante, y creo que hoy con todas las personas que estamos aquí reunidos, es que trabajemos en conjunto. Esa posibilidad de estrechar las manos e ir hacia el frente. Porque Internet hace que el planeta Tierra sea uno solo. Agradezco profundamente el reconocimiento que ustedes hacen hoy para Costa Rica. Me honra ser yo el que tenga que recibirlo. Y por favor, consideren a Costa Rica su casa para cualquier emprendimiento cognitivo que lleve como elemento esencial el construir un mundo mejor para todos y todas. Que tengan todos muy buenas noches, muchas gracias y pues el gobierno de la República de Costa Rica les agradece y se compromete con la causa que ustedes tienen. Buenas noches.
Minister Salazar, thank you very much indeed. Now I'd like to invite Gonzalo Camarillo, Chair of the Internet Society Board of Trustees, up to the stage. Gonzalo.
Thank you, James. I'm here to say a few words on behalf of the board. So first of all, let me acknowledge 3 other trustees that came also today. Is John Levin, the secretary of the board. It's Hiroshi Esaki and Mike Godwin. So you are around there. I cannot see very well because of the spotlight, but you can find them somewhere. There. Yeah, I see Hiroshi, Mike, and John is somewhere. So we are here to celebrate the 2019 inductees to the Hall of Fame, the Internet Hall of Fame, as Andrew mentioned, and we will have 11 inductees, and I think the diversity of this group is going to be great. Everyone has a different original story, and we're going to be hearing them shortly. So I'm actually very excited about that, and I hope you all are, and we will listen to that. But in this brief speech, I want to address 2 things. What is the process we have used to pick those inductees, and then, following up on Luis' speech, why we came to Costa Rica. So those two topics very briefly, and then I will acknowledge a few individuals and organizations that they are our friends and they have been supporting us all along. So first, how do we choose inductees in the Internet Hall of Fame? We have a advisory board, and the advisory board is made up of past inductees, and they basically choose based on criteria they come up with who should be inducted, and now we are actually carrying this out every second year. In addition to that, in addition to picking up inductees for a certain year, they are in charge also of basically overseeing the evolution of the reward. As you know, it's not the same, the original one when we did it initially as now. So if I look back to 2 years ago, in 2017, we were in LA. It was actually a quite big event. We were celebrating the 25 years of ISOC as well, of the Internet Society. And at that point, we had divided inductees in 3 categories, which were pioneers, innovators, and global connectors. This year, you will notice that there's no categories, so everyone is basically recognized in the same way. And the reason for that is that it was very difficult to have a taxonomy where each inductee would fit. The impact that these inductees are creating actually goes across categories, and sometimes it would belong to 2 categories or even the 3 of them. So we chose actually, or the advisory chose, the advisory board chose to remove categories. So now we are just having a single bucket for all inductees. The second point I wanted to address, as I said, following up on the point made before, was why did we come to Costa Rica in particular? And before I do that, let me actually acknowledge we have several members of the advisory board and past inductees, and they are Demi Getsko, Ed Kroll, Steve Hatter, and Randy Bush. So they are also around there, and thanks so much for coming. So the last point I wanted to address very briefly is why did we come to Costa Rica? So as you know, we had Internet Hall of Fame celebrations in Europe, in Asia, in North America last time. So we wanted basically to, move to another region because the Internet Society thinks that we should be a global organization, and that is good actually to go there and recognize people locally as well. So in that sense, in the future, we may also visit different regions that, they haven't been visited before in this ceremony. But more importantly, why Costa Rica in particular, and not any other country in the region? And basically, I think Luis was addressing the point very well, is because of the work that we have seen Costa Rica doing. I think they have done a really great job, actually, advancing the Internet and deploying it here, following all the models that the Internet Society has been advocating for years. So in that sense, we were really happy to come here and extremely honored to have Luis actually give a speech here and recognize basically and basically accept our award. So thanks a lot for that again. Okay, and then we are in Costa Rica, and Luis actually mentioned already the person I wanted to acknowledge, but it's impossible not to mention Guy de Terramont. So let me say a few words about Guy. He used to be known as the father of the Internet in Costa Rica. And the reason why he is not anymore known as the father of Internet in Costa Rica is that he is currently known as the grandfather of the Internet in Costa Rica. and I think he's very proud of his grandsons, and it's kind of, a really respected figure here. He's a board member of NICSR, and he led actually the process of first connecting Costa Rica to the internet back in '93, and not only in Costa Rica, but in many countries in Central America. So that's a great achievement. In addition to all that, he's actually a very respected physicist. And let me stress that he's just a world-class physicist, and his work has been widely published, and he has actually very interesting theories in that field. Let me tell you, it's not very easy to make significant contributions in several fields, and so we are very, very honored to have Guy among us. We were talking before, and I would like to have, yet another round of applause for him. Thanks a lot for your pioneering work in the region. And then lastly, I would like basically to acknowledge a few organizations and friends of us that they have been actually supporting ISOC and partnering with us. You have them there, and let me basically go quickly through them. We have Ministerio de Ciencia, Tecnología y Telecomunicaciones, Superintendencia de Telecomunicaciones, Comisión Técnica Regional de Telecomunicaciones, Defensoría de los Habitantes, la Asociación Iberoamericana de Empresas de Telecomunicaciones, and NICSR. So thanks a lot for all your support and being partnering with us. And with that, without further ado, I thank again all the inductees for all your work and the support on the deployment on the internet. And with that, over to James.
Thank you, Gonzalo. So, without further ado, it's now time for the awards themselves. But before we bring our first inductee on stage, I wanted to mention tonight that they will be receiving a memento in the ceremony today. The official award is somewhat heavy, and we don't want to be responsible for excess baggage fees on the way home, so it will be sent to them, our inductees, individually after the ceremony. I will be reading the names of the inductees out in alphabetical order, and will invite them to join me on stage to say a few words before Gonzalo hands over the awards in recognition. Gonzalo was so good at this job last time that we've asked him back. So thank you, Gonzalo, for graciously signing up to this job again. So, we start the awards with someone who has been instrumental in increasing internet network penetration in Togo and across Africa, where he's considered one of the continent's internet pioneers. He's also served as founding CEO of the Regional Internet Registry for Africa. He is Adiel Aplogan.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, friends, and all invited guests, it's an honor for me to join this impressive group of fellow inductees. I would have never thought 25 years ago that I would stand here and be able to talk and be honored to join you. I have worked with many of you in different circumstances and on different projects. But this induction resonated deeply in me as a recognition from you as Pierre. But I'm standing here having particular thoughts to my friends, my colleagues, and those I call my comrades back in the region, and thinking about how important it is for us not to ever give up. Not to ever give up doing the right thing, despite all the difficulty in a region like us. We must continue to support progress, even as little as they can be, or perceived. We should cherish them and consolidate them at all costs. Our achievement always fuel more initiative and greater progress. Quoting somebody, talents are everywhere, opportunity are not. So every time we have the opportunity to identify some of those, we need to seize them and work not for personal gain and all, but to allow those talents to benefit from them. Nominated for effort and contribution to several initiatives that brought and grew the internet in West Africa in the 90s, and also for leading and nurturing the consensus approach that has helped to create Afrinic, the Internet Number Registry in Africa in 2004. I have witnessed over those 25 years how technology can change and improve people's life on a daily basis. The time has passed where we were laughed at as young engineer, shy probably, but very energetic, locked in a 5x5 room, sitting on our gear, eating, sleeping, and working to connect our country to the internet with its own domain. How can we do that in a country where everything telecom has to go through the telecommunication company? That was laughable. But guess what? We did it. We connect the country to the internet and provide the service to a lot of companies and individual people. That milestone achieved, we enthusiastically joined another aspirational idea, because as operator, we were facing a lot of challenge managing and receiving internet number resources. We worked to achieve that goal as well, building and growing Afrinic as a regional number internet resources that will very quickly become the catalyst for the continental internet ecosystem, tackling challenges we were facing one at a time, but with diligence, discipline, and beyond all, with courage. Why courage? Because we were operating in a region that is always perceived as complex, where top-down and monopolistic mindset prevail. Though there is still a lot to do in the region, we believe that the ground is profoundly set in the direction that will continue to enable and support the internet uptake in the region. All that done, and now that we recognize the positive impact of technology and innovation, the challenge is upon all of us to be able to put our knowledge, our understanding of the technology openly available to policymakers. We have to work with them to help them steer policy and norms that will continue to be enabler for innovation without permission. I look forward to continue working with you all, fellow of the Hall of Fame, to support, encourage, value, and promote the benefit of open standard and technology for further success in the region, but also globally. Thank you for trusting me, but more than that, for also paying attention for what we were doing down there in the region. I would like to thank Isaac as well for creating and continue supporting the Hall of Fame initiative, and also organizing, of course, this very beautiful ceremony here in Costa Rica. We will continue working diligently with discipline and courage to build consensus and make the internet a very key element for the development. Thank you.
A pioneer in the field of internet measurement and analysis, our next inductee has helped the global scientific research community better understand the internet and how it's used. In addition to conducting her own research, she has developed infrastructure and methodologies for large-scale internet data collection, analysis, and distribution around the world. She is Kimberly Casey Claffey. who is not here with us tonight, but we do have a special video message from her to play in her absence.
Hi. I regret not being able to be there in person to receive this honor from the Internet Society, which has been received by many people I've admired for all my professional life. Many of them have humbly said in their acceptance talks over the years that they were lucky to be in the right place at the right time, or lucky to work with so many amazing people who seem more deserving of the award. I certainly share both of these feelings myself. I also admire ISOC for putting all these little bits of history online, so here's a bit of mine. I went to UC San Diego Graduate School in 1989, thinking I would study artificial intelligence during what I guess was its second wave. But UC San Diego hosted one of the original NSF-funded supercomputer centers due to the vision and intense dedication of Sid Caron, its founding director, and the visionary role of the National Science Foundation in funding a revolution, which is what a National Academies report called the US government's strategic support for computing research in the 80s and 90s. And so it did. It's hard to find people outside internet historians who know that the first internet backbones were created to connect scientific researchers to high-performance computing facilities. I was delighted to see Steve Wolf inducted into this group in 2013. He described in his speech the exact moment that he and a physics colleague discovered the, quote, boon that networking would be for scientific research. Steve was the NSF program director who managed the also visionary NSFNet backbone project in the 80s and 90s, co-led by Hans-Werner Braun. Steve also funded my PhD research, with Hans-Werner advising me along with a terrific set of faculty from UC San Diego, including Sid Caron and my faculty advisor, George Polizos, who was himself a second-generation student of another Hall of Fame inductee, Leonard Kleinrock. So with all of this support, I was able to do the first, and I feared the last, scientific study on a public internet backbone, relying on traffic, topology, and performance data that the National Science Foundation mandated be collected and shared publicly by the NSFNet project. Then the year I finished graduate school was also the year that NSF decommissioned this backbone, carefully implementing it to prevent partitioning of the network. It was lightweight industrial policy that stewarded a global ecosystem into existence. Boy, was that a thing to watch in grad school. So many previous awardees have spoken of the magic sauce of the internet. The opposite of secret sauce, I guess, because they all use the word open. Open standards, open architecture, open source. They said this openness is what made the internet, which sounds mostly right, although not much like how we experience the internet today. Paul Vixie, in his 2014 Hall of Fame acceptance speech, said he spent the first 15 years of his career making communications easier across what he optimistically imagined as humanity's digital nervous system. The commercialization of the internet represented a bit of an inflection point for his optimism, because he then said he spent the next 15 years trying to make communications harder, or at least more selective and secure, because of all of the malicious activity contained in humanity's digital nervous system. He's still working on that part, bless him. I also had a front row seat for this incredibly captivating historical inflection point at the beginning of my career, and I was lucky to spend decades studying the resulting ecosystem from as many scientific angles as the political economy would allow. But it's also clear that another massive inflection point is coming, from laissez-faire back to government involvement. Because while this technology is still early in the process of revolutionizing every other ecosystem it touches, society is increasingly exposed to a range of harms serious enough to create a public interest in mitigating them. This is scarier than the first inflection point, because the path to good regulation is not obvious, and mistakes by governments are more dangerous and take longer to undo than mistakes by the private sector. It's not a space where move fast and break things is a good idea. And yet, regulation often comes in a reactive mode, where the priority is not deep thought about possible ramifications. So, now is the time for internet researchers, scientists, engineers, historians, and scholars to think hard about what advice to give the governments of the world, and most importantly, what sort of data can back up that advice, and how that data can be made available so that multiple stakeholders can independently and responsibly analyze it, so that we can have deep and public conversations about the implications for policy. Sustained measurement or compelled reporting of data and its analysis generally comes at considerable effort and cost, so it must shed light on an important problem. We need to be as precise as we can about what those problems are. This reasoning motivated my recent collaboration with my favorite Hall of Fame inductee, David Clark, with whom I've been honored to work with for years. Hoping to contribute to just this conversation, we attempted to taxonomize the range of harms that can arise in the internet ecosystem. Our goal was to help efforts to mitigate harms in a more systematic way, as opposed to fighting an endless defensive battle against whatever comes next, which is sort of what the headline suggests is happening now. It's only a draft, but it's a start, and Dave should probably present it at an IETF plenary soon. Anyway, one of the punchlines is that getting to a better place will require, among other noble endeavors, measurement and data analysis. Thanks so much for this honor, which as soon as it's public, I'm going to go tell my dream team research group that it's all they're doing. They and my cherished family that puts up with an idea having me are the wind beneath my wings. Thank you.
Our third inductee wrote the first series of textbooks explaining the scientific principles underlying the design of the internet and its communications protocols, providing some of the earliest formal guidelines for building efficient networks and applications that use the internet. Douglas Comer.
Well, there are lots of people I would like to thank. I thank the advisory board for inducting me. I thank, way back, Peter Denning and Larry Landweber for including me on the CSNet project that got it all started for me. They made me in charge of protocols at a time when I knew very little about protocols. I taught to do, and we needed to build a network to get across all computer science departments, and we didn't have enough money to afford a new backbone. So we decided to use X25, an existing public service that we could use to transport data from one site to the other. And I explained to Vint, I didn't know how to do protocol translation, which was the way everybody did it those days. And so I decided to use something that became known as tunneling. I thought I was pretty well set and approved it. Then we sent in the CSNet proposal, and the National Science Foundation had anonymous reviewers review the proposal, and they came back with very negative reviews. Now, some of them didn't bother me at all. They said, for example, this is a multi-institutional grant with multiple institutions running budgets. We're going to have to do acquisitions, and nobody on this project, it's just a bunch of professors, nobody has had any real program management experience. You ought to be a real program manager. That didn't bother me because I really didn't know about budgets and how to acquire equipment and lines, and that was okay. But they also singled out my part. They said, point blank, that idea about putting IP packets over X25 will not work. You can't do it that way. Now, I was an assistant professor at the time. I was going to come up for tenure. As you can imagine, I had no way, I didn't want to have a black mark on my record. I had nothing to back me up except a hunch that it would work. So I dug in. I said to myself, I better find out about these protocols. What do these experts know that I don't? I worked and worked and worked. I studied all the protocols, not just individuals, but I studied how they interacted together. I thought about routing. I thought about addressing. I thought about corner cases. I thought about maybe we should do an implementation. So I implemented the protocols, put them across my tunnel. Well, a few years later, it all turned out that it worked just fine. But that study had a profound impact on my career and on my books. When it came time to write the books, I already knew firsthand all about the protocols. I had studied them so intently that I understood corner cases, I understood how to implement them, I understood what not to do. So I boiled down all the principles, all the details, and all of my findings about protocols and put them in the books. And I have always thought that's one of the key reasons that my books were so wildly successful, because they weren't just some professor writing a textbook, they were from firsthand experience. So, my final thanks for intimidating me into studying protocols goes to those obnoxious and absolutely incompetent NSF reviewers who forced me to study. Pura vida.
Now to someone who was actively involved in the deployment of the National Science Foundation's NSFNet, which promoted advanced networking in the US and became the network model for the commercial internet. She was also instrumental in the transition of the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority functions from stewardship of the US government to a multi-stakeholder community. Elise Gerich.
I'm not quite as tall. I have to lower these a bit. Thank you very much for this recognition. I was so pleased and surprised to receive it, and I'm very, very happy to see so many friends that I've worked with over the 30 years in my networking experience here today. I'm sorry for those that couldn't make it, but for those of you who are here, I'm really happy to be surrounded by friends. When I started at Merit in 1987, I really didn't know anything about networking at all. And I want to tell a small story. It's about one of my longtime friends and colleagues who's here. At the first meeting that Merit held for the regional network technical people, I was very new. I'd probably only been on the job about 3 weeks. And at that time, what was fashionable was to wear sweaters that had your initials on them, and we called them monograms. My initials on my sweater, for those of you who might be old-timers, were EGP. So that's my initials, so I didn't worry about it. But this gentleman who's in the audience, I can't see him, came up to me and he said, "What's your metric?" And I looked at him and I said, "Metric?" I said, "It's my initials." Well, for those of you who aren't informed, EGP is the Exterior Gateway Protocol that was used in networks at that point in time. And I didn't have a clue. So happily, I had some colleagues that were clueful. They helped me to learn and to become part of the team that was better at building networks. And I progressed, and my career progressed. So thank heavens for those colleagues. Some that I'll name are Dave Katz and Hans-Werner Braun and Bilal Chinoy. They were part of the team that helped me to find out what EGP was and some of the other protocols. But part of my networking experience as I grew as a networking person, an internet person, people would come up and say, "Well, what was it like to be a woman in a men's field?" And I've got to compliment the Merit folks who hired the NSFNet staff. They were gender blind. So I want to make a shout out to all the women I worked with at Merit. In the Internet Engineering group, there were only 7 of us, and 4 of us were women. There was Sue Hares. Some of you may have run across Sue. She's done a lot in the internet. Jessica Yu, another person who's been very, very active. Kathy Aronson, I'm sure many of you run into Kathy also, and me. So we were part of the Internet Engineering team. Then we had a network operations staff. They were very technical, managed to keep the network up at all times. The women that worked there were Sue Blair, Deb Boyer, Gartha Parrish, Sherry Rapucci, and Serpil Bayraktar. They've all continued in their networking careers, and we never felt like we were outnumbered. Not at Merit anyway, but if we went to other meetings, that's a different story. But having that core group of people to grow up with and to learn my networking really gave me the confidence, I think, to do what I was able to do later in my career. So I always saw my role as fostering collaboration and cooperation with other network operators and with other internet colleagues. And I think that was the most fulfilling part, is making those connections. And I think Andrew spoke to that earlier tonight when he talked about networking isn't just about the bits and bytes and the packets and the wires. It's about the people we work with and the connections we make and how we cross borders and cultures and become quite interconnected. So that was always a very important part for me. And it was fun. And it was fun till I decided to retire. And then I'm probably still having fun, but it's a different kind of fun. But it really was a good time for the 30 years. NSFNet, went to a startup at home, went to Juniper Networks, and I finished my career as the IANA at ICANN. So now I'd like to do some thanks to some other folks. One of them is Kathy Aronson. I've already mentioned her. I didn't know about it. It was unbeknownst to me, but Kathy submitted my name for nomination. And I'm so pleased and proud and surprised. And I thank the ISOC chapter and committee and advisory board for selecting me. I really appreciate it. And then most of all, I'd like to thank my family, my husband, John, our two daughters, Jocelyn and Samantha, for supporting me in all the steps of the way. The internet kind of consumed me. I became pretty much a workaholic about it. But they supported me every day and in every way, so it allowed me to have this wonderful career. And in fact, I'll just finish on saying, in 1987, or in the late 1980s, my husband said to me, "You seem a little bored. Maybe you should get a job." Well, the rest is history. I got a job, and here I am. Thank you very much.
So our next inductee produced the first empirical study proving the existence of the digital divide. This groundbreaking research sparked global efforts to begin bridging that divide, and countries widely cited today by those studying the internet and access around the world. Larry Irving.
Mr. Minister, members of the Internet Society, distinguished guest friends. It's an honor to be here, and I want to thank the Internet Society and Advisory Board for selecting me. And I also have to thank a couple of people, starting with President Bill Clinton and Vice President Al Gore, late Secretary of Commerce Ron Brown. In 1993, they found not just a non-engineer, but a lawyer. And not just a lawyer, but a mass media broadcast lawyer, and gave me the charge of helping to develop policy for the United States with regard to how we were going to move forward on internet policy. Our credo was putting people first, which stacks up very nicely with what Andrew talked about. The internet is for everyone. And every day we were trying to figure out what could we do that would bring the internet to everyone. I'm a proud graduate of Northwestern University and of Stanford University in the United States, and I was out in Palo Alto and Cupertino. And I was with Secretary Brown. We went down to Cupertino, the home of Apple Computer, and we saw these children around desks, and they each were around a network computer, and they were having a great time. Later that day, We went up to a low-income community in San Francisco called Hunters Point. They were poor students, they were predominantly minority students. They didn't have a clue that a thing called the internet existed. And from that came our decision that we were going to study the digital divide. We knew that in order to move policy in the United States and across the planet, we had to understand who was on, why they were on, who wasn't on, and why they weren't on. And then we had to develop policies that would bring all of these people to the net. Now, as everyone has said today, the internet is a collaborative effort. Nothing happens in internet policy without a whole bunch of people putting their shoulders to the wheel. I was fortunate. I had bosses such as Dave Barham, the Deputy Secretary. When I did my first study working with the Census Bureau in the United States, so we did a 50,000 person study, my good friend who's also from Queens, New York, Everett Ehrlich, was the Undersecretary of Commerce and helped me put that study together. Many of you know the brilliant Laura Breeden. Others of you know Bernadette McGuire Rivera. You may not know Becky Burr, but you should. Roanne Robinson, my deputy Tom Shagru, Jim Wazalewski, Kelly Levy, Jim McConaughey, and Wendy later, who put together the first internet studies, the first falling to the net studies. There were so many more, but everything we did was a collaborative effort. I want to congratulate my fellow inductees, but I want to give a special congratulations to my longtime friend, Dan Lynch, who's not with us tonight, who'll be on a little later. And over the last couple of days, I've met people who I've interacted with over the, Gene and I've met online for years and have never met, and I've met other people here who we've interacted. Eddie L. and I have a joint history with the Leland Project, had never met, but our foundations with that great project. So I'm honored to be here today. In 1993, when we first started talking about the digital divide and doing the work that defined the digital divide, there were 15 million people on this planet on the internet. Today there are 4 billion. A lot of people in this room did a lot of work to make that happen. But we have a lot that we need to do still. This is the most transformative technology of our lifetimes. It is certainly the technology that has reached more people more rapidly than any technology in the history of this planet. We've done a lot of good work. We've got a lot of work left to do. Just in my home country, the United States, just looking at children, there are 3 million students in the United States who are school age who go home to no internet. 1 out of 7 kids in America don't have broadband at home, in a country where we have about a 90% internet penetration. Jessica Rosenworcel, the FCC Commission, has called that the homework gap, and it's a gap that we've got to close. More importantly, in the United States, there are still 5 million rural households, and there are 15 million urban and suburban households that don't have internet either because they don't have access in the rural areas or they can't afford it in the urban and suburban areas. We need policymakers to step up and change that. Globally, if you look at the front page of the Internet Society today, 51% of the planet is connected. But that means 49% aren't connected, and that's going to be the harder 49%. The low-hanging fruit has already been gathered. I can't believe that we've come this far, and I can't believe how far we've yet to go. I want to continue to work to connect people, and I've been reading what Tim Berners-Lee is talking about, not only connections, but meaningful connections. We've got to make sure that when people are connected, they're doing things with us that enhance their lives and enhance the lives of people they live and love with. They live with and love. That's what this Internet Society is all about. It's what my work throughout my career has been all about. My wife, Leslie, recently graduated from Divinity School, and she's here with me tonight, a little under the weather. So maybe it's appropriate that I close with a biblical verse. Galatians 6, chapter 9. Let us not become weary in doing good. With the proper time, we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Adiel said something very similar in his statement this afternoon. Everyone here tonight has put their shoulders, worked against odds to make this a better planet, to make the internet a reality for all of our fellow citizens. That's the theme that we're working with. It seems a proper direction for the path ahead. Thank you very much.
Now someone else who unfortunately is not with us here tonight. As a developer, researcher, and evangelist of the TCP/IP protocols, Dan Lynch played a key role in driving global adoption of these protocols and fueling the Internet's commercial success, public visibility, and use. We can watch a video from Dan now.
I'm sorry I can't be with you today. I can't travel much anymore. I had a stroke 10 years ago, which didn't affect my brain, I don't think, but did affect my mobility quite a lot. So anyway, I got introduced to the ARPANET in April of '73 at SRI, Stanford Research Institute, where I got a job as the manager of the Artificial Intelligence Computer Center. And the very first day on the job, they showed me this thing called the ARPANET. And I looked at that and went, wow, this is cool. I mean, you know, I'd come from a missile defense background and doing that kind of work, and buried in some secret place. And then came out and into the real world. And so I played around with this ARPANET stuff for a while. And then about a year or two later, a guy named Bill Plummer at BBN said to me, he was a system programmer there, and he said, hey, I'm testing this new thing called TCP, and I want you to, you know, we're doing it in the building here at BBN, but we need a cross-country testing site, and will you help me? And I said, sure. So I started doing that in my spare time, and I did that for about a year with him in a language called BCPL, which was the precursor of C, and that was a lot of fun. And then I did debugging with him. I had installed the code on my computer, and you know, a PDP-10, a 10X machine, which was the machine of choice for most big sites in those days. And then I met Vint Cerf in those days too. He was a young professor at Stanford. I say young because he's 2 years younger than I am, so he'll always be young. And he was a neat guy. And then, so I did that, and that was my early years as, I guess, call it a developer, a debugger. And I mean, we had no idea what we were doing in those days with it. I mean, we knew what we were trying to do, but it was it was a lot of fun. And then the next phase of my involvement with the internet, because in 1978, the protocol was essentially fixed, and sites on the ARPANET were starting to convert over to the internet protocols and running them side by side because, you know, we had to. And then I moved on to Los Angeles to the Information Sciences Institute as their manager of their computing facilities. And that was the biggest node on the ARPANET in those days. It had about 6 machines online and about 3,000 people using them. And around the world, actually, mostly around the country, but around the world. And I was working for Bob Kahn and Vint Cerf at ARPA, really, and even though I'm theoretically an employee of USC. And they told me, hey, we're going to convert everything over to internet, and I want you to manage that process for machines all over the internet. And so I did that for a while, a couple of years. And then we had a flag day, the last flag day in history. That is the day when they shut the ARPANET down and turned everybody onto the internet, January 1st, 1983. That was hilarious. And then, so I did that. And then about a year later, I left that job because things were happening and I wanted to get involved in a startup of some sort. And so I moved back to Silicon Valley with no job, just, you know, looking for, you know, because friends of mine had started Cisco and they'd started Sun Microsystems, and I'm going, wait a minute, I can do this too. And I tried that and failed 2 or 3 times, actually. And then I realized in about late 85, early 86, that people all over the world were trying to build internet stuff, and they were doing a mediocre job. So I became an educator, I call myself now, of internet technology. And I started a company called Advanced Computing Environments. I thought that's a clever name. And to teach, engineers how the internet worked, because I knew, and I knew all the people that built it. They were all friends of mine, John Postel and Danny Cohen and, Dave Clark and Dave Mills and Vint Cerf. So I started this thing, and eventually it became called Interop, the TCP/IP Interoperability Conference and Exhibition. And that grew like topsy for 3 or 4 years, just grew from 300 people to 50,000 people in 4 years. I think you got something when the growth is that fast, eh? And then I sold that company because I didn't really want to run a giant trade show company. And then I started looking around for things to do in the early 90s. And I realized, the internet's not going to take off unless there's a way to send money around. And another guy found me, and we started a company which we called Cybercash, to put credit cards and move money on the internet. And we built that company with Steve Crocker. He was our CTO, and so we built that company and launched it. And after a couple of years, we went bankrupt because we didn't have enough customers. We had great technology and mediocre marketing. And another company came along with, I'll just be blunt, great marketing and mediocre technology. And guess who won? And that company is called PayPal. And they eventually bought all our technology out of bankruptcy. And so it's a success, a great success. Bravo for them. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And I hope you guys have a great time in Costa Rica. I'd love to be there. My children, all of my adult children have been there, but I haven't. And I would love to be there, but I can't go. So enjoy your times. Bye-bye.
That's the second and last of our video messages. So the good news is, Gonzalo, that you're going to be gainfully employed now until we get to the end of our inductee list. One of the first US librarians to offer computer and internet access to the public, our next inductee transformed the public library service and redefined the role of the librarian as a digital educator and internet advocate. Jean Amour-Polly.
Hello, everyone. Well, I am, like everyone else, I'm thrilled to accept this award and to be part of this stellar class here today. But like all of you, I've done a lot of interesting things in my life, in my career. From this librarian thing, I'm going to focus on that, but I've also written a lot of books for kids on the internet, and I worked as an internet evangelist for a mid-level regional as well. So I'd like to focus on thanking the Internet Society for recognizing the important part that public librarians have played in helping to grow the reach of the internet and its use by everybody. In 1981, I was a professional librarian at a small library in upstate New York. Home computers were not widespread, but school kids were getting them. And I was wondering how adults or their parents or everyone else in the community was supposed to get these skills. So while librarians are not really known for our risk-taking skills, I do believe that you need to take a risk and you always learn something. Sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing, but I wanted to go with this thing. So we bought an Apple Plus computer, Apple II Plus computer. We put it out for the public to use. And we bought some software. We had Oregon Trail, of course, that was ubiquitous back then, and VisiCalc, remember that? And a word processor, some other things. We started letting the public use it. Well, within 6 months, it was so popular, we had to buy a second computer, and we got a printer. That was a big deal. In 1983, as home computing started to become more mainstream, and as hobbyists began buying modems, they didn't really have a lot of places to call back then. They just had a few bulletin board systems, electronic BBS systems, that people ran out of their homes, and you would call that modem and get online. Well, I decided it would be fun to have the library run an electronic bulletin board system. So we operated it off a modem pool of one, and it was on the library. We only had one phone line at the library, so we plugged in the modem when we all went home for the evening. We called it the night shift, and we got about 1,000 calls a month. It was huge. And we set it up like the Dewey Decimal System because we were librarians. So if you wanted to discuss religion, you were in the 200 bulletin board discussion group, you know. Well, it was also with the modem, it was a 1200 baud modem, by the way. By 1992, we were offering public access internet via a slip connection, but we had moved up to 14.4, which was, we thought that was great. And that later escalated into getting a 56K and a Class B network, because in those days it was thought that libraries would become free nets and community resources for connectivity. Well, we always hear about the last mile connectivity problem, but I was more concerned myself with the last arm's length, which is, you know, between your fingers and the brain. And that's where my niche was as a librarian. How best to help people take their first baby steps on the internet, and that's where I got the nickname Net Mom, which, by the way, is a registered trademark. International Class 42. Anyway, for you lawyers out there, Larry. So it's painfully true that in those early days, though, a lot of my colleague librarians were not so thrilled about this internet thing, because heretofore they had been the guardians of knowledge and wisdom on the internet, and you know, here was this internet thing that was unvetted and without any authority to tell you something, and they really considered it a competitor. So again, I was a road warrior like many of you, and took my 5-pound laptop and my modem and my my evangelism and went to 20 different states and talked about the internet to librarians. And I helped them learn how to use it and learn how to not be afraid of it. We did recognize the potential on the horizon, and not only that people could access the wealth of the internet, but also could contribute to it, which is just as important. And these days, I'm happy to say that public access internet is considered a core library service. Library users need it to apply for jobs, access health information, send and receive email, and of course play games, because public libraries are for recreation too. But not only that, it's truly a social equity issue, because so much information that helps people self-educate and self-empower is only available online now. But at this time, I would like to confess that my undergraduate major was medieval studies. Do not ask me to set up a zone file, but do allow me to give kudos to the system administrators in libraries and the network wizards who keep the packets flowing in the public library systems. They're largely unsung, and if you give me a minute, I'm going to sing them. Their labors are critical, and I want to acknowledge the work of my colleagues Rick Fensterer and Stephanie Zwolinski. and also to the website designers and content creators. So thank you to Diane Tolson. And I want to mention two other visionary librarians who encouraged me. That would be Monica Ertel and Steve Sisler from the Apple Corporate Library in Cupertino. They ceded equipment and other help to libraries like my own who were willing to take risks. I would also like to thank my nominator, Susan Estrada, a Hall of Fame inductee in her own right, and my writers of endorsement letters, Beverly Chalco Devlin of the Tacoma, Washington Public Library, Karen G. Schneider, Dean of the University Library from Sonoma State University, and Stephen Carrick Davis, CEO of the Mondo Foundation in London. He does a lot of interesting internet education activities abroad. And also thank you to my family, my poor husband Larry. He's a website designer and developer and a lifelong learner, and our son of net, Stephen, who's here with his lovely bride Lauren over there. And in conclusion, it's wonderful to be the first librarian to receive this honor. However, as Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, the first female U.S. Supreme Court Justice, once said, "I've always thought that while it's wonderful to be the first, you don't want to be the last." So to all you librarians out there, the biggest enemy is complacency. You must, and so continue to innovate and take risks, and someday you may be right here. Thank you very much for this honor.
So now to someone who played a key role in bringing the internet to Peru, and who was the primary architect and advocate of a public internet kiosk model that has democratized network access so it could better reach underserved and non-Spanish speaking Peruvians. Jose Soriano.
It's a great honor to be inducted in this Internet Hall of Fame. I don't do it as my name alone. I do it of all the Peruvians who work in this network we built in the 90s. We learn very good the teaching of Randy Bush sometime when he teaches technology with love, hippie and repentant words. And we create with that a vision. That vision was make a network for all nations. In that time, in Latin America, we have only academic networks for one side. And the other side, we have only NGO networks. Sometimes some government have one network, but we don't have the model of a national network. That means take everybody into the internet. And the message we received in that time was internet is generosity, internet is interrelation between people, internet is negotiate with other people to have links, to have nets, to have some service somewhere. Then we applied that in our country. We talk with doctors, librarians, universities, NGOs, government, and we put everybody together. But we realized something. We have all the software in English. Then we decide we must do something about that. Then we translate everything we know in Spanish to the people of the big cities in our country. But we was a country of 40 million people in that time. And we have only 400,000 computers. We don't have enough for make an internet for everybody in the 90s. Then we decide we're going to do something who allows people to come paying a very little money to have access to the internet, and we create something what it was, we don't discover nothing. We make what we call in Spanish cabinas públicas. Then we have a network, UUCP network, connected with Randy Bush in the United States, talking two times a day, sending information. We say, but we need to do something more. Then we begin to negotiate and we make something. The technician says, you cannot do it. You cannot make internet with satellite. We do it. Other technicians tell us you cannot do internet using radio. We use radio to communicate the Indians in the Amazonian forest. Other technicians says you cannot use cellular phones to communicate because it's not going to work. We do it also. Then we have some technical achievements also who was very important for our region, because we don't begin with the technology to teach people technology. We begin with the problem of the people, and we use technology to solve these problems. One of these problems was also 8 million people talk Quechua, which is an Indian language in our country. And together, all the people who work in this network begin to see how we can do to involve also this community into the internet. Then we involve some professors in Quechua, and we begin to translate content in Quechua and involve all the Indians, the communities in different regions of our country. Then we have a lot of achievements, but is that only the work of one people? As it was said here, is the work of many people, the unknowing people who are not here today, but I feel I need to represent. That is the thousands of Peruvians. We receive help at the beginning from Randy Bush, from Steve Goldstein, from Costa Rican, Ted Hope, who helped us to install the first servers in Peru. But after that, we asked to train our own very young engineers they learn where the information was. For us, it was not a technological problem. For us, it was a knowledge problem. We need that knowledge, and we spread this knowledge on even in the very, very fond of the Amazonian forest. I can ask, lo voy a decir en español, podría decir que quiero estar agradecido con los miles de peruanos y latinoamericanos que nos ayudaron a construir también los organismos de gobierno de Internet, que juntos construimos en esos años 90, donde era muy difícil trabajar con las empresas que querían mantener sus monopolios. De todas maneras, esas luchas dieron como resultado el Internet que tenemos hoy. And we are very happy about that. Thanks.
So we stay in South America for our next awardee. This person was instrumental in bringing the internet to Brazil and continues to participate in the design and deployment of scalable optical networks in South America and around the world. Michael Stanton.
Good evening. As you will have maybe noticed, Brazil is represented here in the Internet Hall of Fame by three typical Brazilians. There's Tadao Takahashi, there's Demi Getchko, and there's myself. And we all came together in the 1980s to be able to help to construct the first internet network in Brazil. This had a series of aspects. I only met the two of them during this process, and it was an interesting one because it was conducted partly within the scientific community. I was a university professor, have been from when I went to Brazil in 1971 until my retirement 5 years ago. And during this time, in the 80s, I was working as the head of department of computer science at the Catholic University in Rio de Janeiro. And my first activity connected with networks was just using, how shall I put it, local area networks. And then, I've always been interested in communications and also a bit in geography. I read about the NSFnet. You know? The NSFnet was started, engineered in 1985, and the news of this arrived in Brazil a little bit later because at the time we had no good electronic communications. We had to wait for the journals to arrive by surface mail and all that kind of stuff. But I was so impressed by what I read about what was going on in this that I really decided that this was what we needed in order to be able to communicate adequately in the academic community. And so I used the contacts I had in different areas to try to provoke a discussion about such a goal. And there were two meetings which I helped to organize in that year, 1987. One was just of people in the computing and networking area, and this also included called people from our NSFs, called CNPQ, who asked me to organize a larger meeting at the University of São Paulo some months later, to which about 45 people came, and these people represented a part of the government, many of the research groups in different disciplines, and also the state telephone monopoly, which was to prove one of the obstacles in the path of being able to do what we wanted to do. But we went ahead and defined at this meeting what were the obstacles and how we'd like to overcome them. And the result of this was that 2 years later, the Brazilian government launched a project called RNP, that's the National Research Network in Portuguese, and Tadao Takahashi was appointed as the coordinator of this project. And shortly afterwards, he invited Demi and myself to join him, and together we worked in collaboration in order to deliver what was proposed at that meeting 2 years earlier. It took us 3 years, and they were very, very interesting years. We had interaction, for instance, with people in Latin America during this time. There was an international meeting held in Rio de Janeiro, which I helped organize, but I didn't take much part in as far as the international connections were concerned. But we ended up in 1992 with a national backbone network which touched 11 of the 27 constituent parts of Brazil at the vast speed of 64 kilobits a second or 9.6 kilobits a second. It's funny, this was, I suppose you could see, in retrospect, the digital divide between our part of the world and the North America. You know, we had this vast difference between the speeds which were then operating on the NSFnet and our own. However, that was a challenge. RMP was established, as I say, in 1992 as a network. The following year, I moved on back to the university because the option for me to continue with RMP was to stop being a professor and start being living off a grant, and that wasn't really feasible with the number of children I had at that time. So I just started reverting to what was going on, the problems within the universities, and I had a very happy few years interacting there with the new university I went to. I was at the Catholic University in 87, and then I moved to the UFI, the Federal University in Niterói, next to Rio. And that was how I spent the next 8 years. In 1999, the RMP... sorry, I missed out. In 1995, and this is important, the commercial internet came to Brazil. After 2 years of then RMP working and reading about what you could do on the internet, there was a vast clamor for commercial services, and in fact RMP was enrolled in this process of helping to set up the commercial internet. At the same time, we had a new government in that year, 1995, whose job included, whose objectives included to break up the telecom monopoly, which was an essential part of removing obstacles to bringing investment into this kind of activity. And so that was a very tumultuous period, which, as I say, I missed out on quite a lot. However, RMP's involvement was significant because their backbone, which by then was something like 2 meg connections, was widely used as an alternative to the state monopolies network and provide options for providers to be able to take their traffic to the exchange points which were starting to appear. Tadao had left by 1996, and his successor was José Luis Ribeiro. José Luis was working before that at a university in Rio also, and he was alarmed at the idea that there was a lot of discussion at that time of abandoning altogether the support by the government of a national research and education network. And he advanced a new proposal, which was to convert the RMP project into a non-profit company, which would then be contracted by the government on a regular basis as a part of the national budget to operate and run the network. And this was done about 1999, 2000, and this set the stage for what was going to happen after that. What happened after that was that José Luis decided he wanted to be part of the commercial internet also, and so he left RMP and looked for another job. His successor was called Nelson Simões, who has been Director General at RMP now since 2001. And he has, I was already known to him because the university I had been at in 1987, he was also there. And in 2002, he invited me to rejoin RMP as a member of the board of directors, and then to work together to solve the problems or to advance the state of research and education networking in order to make it something which we could best sell to the government as a fixture for supporting the part of to research, education, and similarly related parts of our society which really needed networks. So, in this period, starting 2002, RMP moved in a number of areas for the next few years, developing the network more, producing collaboration within the community of the universities to develop network services for use by our users, and also to start introducing connections, international connections with other networks of a similar kind. And these were obviously the United States, but also in other countries of Latin America and in Europe. So a number of long-term collaborations began with these other continents, and this helped to bring us closer to where we ought to be in terms of providing adequate services for our users. RMP was launched in September 1989, exactly 30 years ago this month. So we're now at the stage of looking back and seeing how we are at present. Brazil is a very large country, as you probably know. We have now clients, campus, in 1,500 points in institutions around the country. And we kind of calculate about 4 million, which is about 2% of the population, is served by these connections, either as people who work in the universities or their students and so on. The latest news we have about attacking the digital divide is we have a series of new initiatives in course. Many of these are to do with network development, and one of the people most involved in handling this is our present director of networks, who's Eduardo Grisengi. And these include, now, this is several years later after the first network, upgrading our backbone to 100 gig, and possibly it's I say scalable. I use the word scalable because it's multiples of 100 gig. It depends on the demand of traffic you have. There's international connections, which are also at the same level, 100 gig, scalable. Red Clara, I didn't mention Red Clara, but Red Clara was set up around 2003 to bring together the similar networks in Latin America, from Mexico down to the south of South America. There are about 14 national networks involved in Red Clara, and this has been a project of building this and operating this network has been the object of much assistance from the European Union through successive projects. And so we are now increasing the capacity of the Red Clara network also to 100 gig scalable. And there are new international routes. There are links to the US. There's a new route to Africa, a new cable, Trans-South Atlantic cable for a change, is enabling us to get directly from Brazil and thus the rest of Latin America to Africa. And for the first time in many, many years, a new submarine cable is under construction at the moment between Brazil and Portugal, which will provide very high capacity, scalable access to Europe. So all of these things are going on at the moment. RMP is now 30 years from its point zero. What it will be like in another 30 years' time, it's very difficult for me to predict. I probably won't be around to see it. But time will tell, and I think the signs are good. I'd like to close by thanking some of the people who have been involved in my proposal to be a member here. The proponent was Peter Knight, who is a United States citizen who lives and works in Brazil. He's an economist and is a stand-up paddler. At 76, he's in very good condition. Then there are my sponsors, the people who provided support letters. There are 5 of them altogether. One is Professor Harvey Newman from Caltech, because of our great collaboration in assisting the physics researchers who are scattered around Brazil. Also Nelson Simões, the Director General, and Flavio Wagner, who is currently the head of the Internet Society in Brazil. And two of my former students, Yara Machado, who is now a director of RMP in my place, and Antonio Abelém from the university in Pará. I'll close by thanking very much the Internet Society for recognizing and approving and giving me this opportunity. I'm very, very pleased and very proud and rather humbled to get to this stage, and I'd like to thank them very much. And finally, my family. I have my daughter here with me. She's sat at the table here at the front. My wife's Virgilia, and we have 2 sons also, Anthony and Leonardo, and they follow and support me very much in all that I do in this respect. And I'd like to thank all of them. Thank you.
Our penultimate inductee is someone who invented EduRoam, which provides a free, secure international Wi-Fi roaming service to academic and research communities when people travel to participating institutions all over the world. Available in over 100 countries, EduRoam has helped increase collaborative initiatives among universities and schools. Klaas Goringa.
You pronounced it better in the rehearsal, but still good job. Buenas noches, good evening. I should start with an apology to my tennis team. In a few hours they're going to play a competition match and I'm standing them up. I trust they understand why. When I received the email that I was nominated, first, of course, I thought somebody was playing a nasty trick on me. But when I started to believe it was real, I went to the website of the Hall of Fame and looked at previous inductees. I know a number of them. I know of a lot of them. But what struck me most was that there were so many people that I've worked with through the years and that are incredibly talented and that have done so much to advance the internet that are not in that list. And I guess I'm very lucky that the people that nominated me and the advisory committee decided that I was worthy of this honor. I think I've been lucky throughout my career, starting with Robert Jans at Groningen University, later Hall of Famer Kees Neggers at SurfNet, Jane Butler at Cisco, and another Hall of Famer, Erik Huizer, first at SurfNet and now already for a few years at Geant. And I'm very grateful to have had the luck to work with them, being stimulated to look at new things, to always look for ways to improve the internet. I'm also standing here a little bit with mixed feelings, I have to say. I'm very proud of having had the idea of EduRoam. At the same time, I don't consider myself as the one that contributed most to the advancement of EduRoam. There are many out there, and I'm going to mention a few names. To start with Paul Dekkers, who came as a student to me and asked if I had an idea for a graduation assignment, and he then built the first proof of concepts and is still around almost 20 years later and very much involved and actually the current chair of the Global Eduroam Governance Committee. There is Licia Florio, who was at the time Terrena, now Géant, and who did a lot to bring Eduroam outside the Netherlands and to the rest of Europe. Later on, she took one for the team and agreed to marry me, and she's the mother of our daughter Lara. Miroslav Milinovic, who turned Eduroam from a plaything for nerds into a true service that can really be used by students all over the world. And last but not least, Stefan Winter, who is the technical man behind all the Eduroam development in the past 10 years or so, and who has contributed tremendously to making sure that Eduroam was fit for purpose. But as I said, it is the work of many, many, by now thousands of people, and I think that is for me the most important thing, and that's what I'm most proud of. That is that there is no central authority, there is no central institution that made this happen across the world. This is really truly a grassroots thing where people all over the world decided to make their own resources, their own network available and throw it in the big pool for the greater good of all. And I think that is something that I'm very proud of. I think it is something that the R&E community is still very good at. Not so much competition, but more collaboration. And I think the internet needs a lot more of that, especially in these times where governments make it a habit to spy on foreigners and their own. If I can make one wish for the future, then I think it is to those of you out there that have ideas to make the internet just a little bit better, just a little bit safer, just a little bit more user-friendly, to go after it and do it. Don't think about how big something may become. That's usually not how it works. It was definitely not the way it worked for me. I was just trying to solve my own problem, and that I helped others with it was just very nice. And if you are in the position to support somebody that comes to you with one of those, at first glance, small ideas, then please support them. Don't ask immediately where the billion-dollar market is. Don't immediately ask how that's going to make you a lot of money or lots of patents or whatever. But try to help them, encourage them in trying things out, and make the internet a better place. Thank you.
That's a great wish for the internet. And finally, our last inductee. As a cybersecurity research pioneer and a global leader in its deployment, we recognize someone who played an integral role in increasing the security of the internet in Asia and around the world. He also founded the Asia Pacific Broadband Internet Research and Educational Network Project. Suguru Yamaguchi. This is a posthumous award, and Dr. Yamaguchi's son, Rui Takita, will accept the award on his father's behalf. And so I'm very pleased to invite him up to the stage, along with Hiroshi Isaki, Internet Society Board of Trustee member. Rui, Hiroshi.
Thank you for the invitation to this ceremony. I'm very honored to be here. Congratulations to all the inductees. My name is Rui. I'm Suguru Yamaguchi's son. My father passed away 3 years ago in 2016, caused by the incurable disease. So sadly, he can't be here in person. I personally very excited to be here at this special ceremony among all of the internet legends who built the internet. I cannot thank my father enough for this special opportunity. My father was an internet security researcher working for the Japanese government. He used to fly around the world to train local engineers. I didn't get to spend too much time with him since he was so busy. But one time, I remember him saying, the internet in Africa is going to develop more and more, so we have to think about internet security in Africa from the start. I was born in 1999. Some people like to call my generation the internet experts. For us, the internet was existent from the moment we were born, and its safety was taken for guaranteed. However, this is all due to the work of my father and his allies. Speaking up to the world, telling the security on the internet is going to be highly important 15 years even before I was born. Today is a memorable day to let the world know about his efforts and achievement in the internet security. I have a message from Jun Murai, known as the father of the Japanese internet. He was both of the great friend and a special colleague of Suguru. And I'd like to call Isaki to reading a message from Jun Murai.
Thank you very much for the recognition of the Professor Suguru Yamaguchi's work. I bring a special message by Jun Murai, who is the founder of the White Project. He wants to share with you the 4 areas of achievement activities of Suguru Yamaguchi to be proud by all of us. First one, he was a pioneer working with me on the computer networks in Japan, starting from JUNet, wide, and the global internet connection starting from 1984. Second, he was a pioneer connect South Asia region by working with leading universities as Asia Internet Connection Initiative AIII, which celebrates its 50th meeting this October, connecting more than 15 countries and 30 leading universities in Asia. Third, he was one of the first people who identified the risk of the internet abusers. He founded most of the cybersecurity institutes existing today in Japan, such as JP-CERT and National Center for Incident Readiness and Strategy for Cybersecurity, called as NISC. Fourth, he sincerely wanted to extend his mission on cybersecurity to everyone on the globe. Therefore, he was working in Africa intensively to enhance the collaboration among them with global cybersecurity community. His contribution has been far more, and his precious spirit and mission will stay with everybody, work with him eternally. I also am proud of very much that his beloved son, Louis, is receiving his token of the inductee of the Internet Hall of Fame. I suspect by looking at Louis, many of attendees today thought, Suguru is back. Please join me and his family to watch over Louis for his bright future with same braveness to challenge for the future as Suguru. Congratulations, Suguru. I miss you very much. Jim Murray, founder of the White Project, inductee of Internet Hall of Fame on Pioneer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murai, for the message, and thank you, Saki, for reading the message. Lastly, on behalf of my father, I'd like to thank all of the members of JP Sir CC, START, JP Nick, A333, the Internet Society of Japan, NICT, and NISC, and the White Project. In addition, all the internet researchers and the engineering in the world. Thank you so much your contribution. I wish all of sustained innovation of the internet. Thank you.
Gentlemen, that concludes our ceremony. One final round of applause for all of our inductees. It's been a huge privilege for me to play a small part in recognizing the people behind the internet. It just remains for me to say, please join us for dinner next door in the adjacent ballroom. Thank you.